Yes, sorry, my apologies before. It's Brisbane that's led by Rear Admiral Loosely and George Hicks. Again, a DDG, fine ships, they go sterling service, built in the United States in the early 1960s, serving right through, in the case of Brisbane, to 2000. The Anzac Association, initially battle class. Initially Anzac and Tobruk were battle class destroyers in the 40s and the 50s, and now the Anzac class frigate have carried on their names.
And we can see it's not only trouble with the banners, it's trouble with the hats in this breeze, keeping them on. A couple of people we can see there have taken them off, and they're carrying them instead of having to chase them down the street.
Anzac today is led by Commodore Les Pataki, the first commanding officer of the current HMAS Anzac, which was actually in the Persian Gulf at the time of 9/11 and has served a number of times in the Persian Gulf.
And some of our war widows there. We do have special seating along the march for special groups, and it's great to see.
Just going out of picture now is the former Chief of Navy, Admiral Russ Crane, who was a 16-year-old entry into HMAS Lewin, boys seaman. It's a Tingara association. Tingara was a training ship in the 1920s and 1930s, and the name was carried on through the association with the junior recruits. Moving into the mine warfare group, the primary mission of which is to check the waterways are safe for naval and commercial ships, and the clearance divings. They delouse mines, they clear, and you can see there's a mixture of cap tallies amongst the sailors there. Some are based at the diving school at Penguin, others are part of the clearance diving team, and others serving on the mine hunters, which are part of the mine element group.
But they're looking good, Kane.
They are looking good. Clearance diving team 3 served in Vietnam as well as in Kuwait and Iraq. The diving team 1 were in East Timor in 1999. An exceptional talented group of men and women.
Well, this is the band, one of our best reserve bands from the University of New South Wales Regiment. Bob, you might tell us a bit about it.
Yes, they are very fine. It turned out very well. The first uniforms, in fact, were presented to me by the Chancellor of the University of New South Wales, Philip Baxter. And since then they have provided many stirring evenings and balls and parades, and they've been here every year since I've been called into the parade.
And now we've got the club swingers, the physical training branch, the charterers to keep morale up by making sure the sailors are fit and hardy. Every major warship carries a PTI, and of course we all come across them during our training in shore establishments.
And in a very short gap there, we got the Wrens.
We have the Wrens. They seem to be led by Joan Evans, who served in the Wrens from 54 to 57. They were the British equivalent of the Rans. Formed first back in 1917, and at their peak in World War II, there were 75,000 women. And followed by their compatriots from the British services, the Royal Marines, led by John Satchell, who did 28 years wearing the distinctive green beret of the Royal Marines. Formed in 1664, the reign of King Charles. They've fought in many, many engagements over the years. And they were some of the first commandos in World War II. And immediately followed a nice picture portrait there of people very interested in the play.
And they're obviously enjoying it. Great to see.
They are. There's quite a number. There's a very distinctive Royal Marine uniform there. And the Royal Naval Association, led by Paul Graham, who served joined from 53 and served in Malaysia and Borneo, and clearly settled in Australia after the war, as did many ex-Royal Navy sailors. And in the background is a chap there who's still just makes fitting into his uniform.
Now more from the Australian Air League. This is the third Air League group, the drum corps from the Padstow Squadron in Western Sydney or southwestern Sydney.
Yes. And there's a couple of little tackers marching there, John.
Yes.
And here we have one of the largest contingents on Friday, HMAS Watson, led by Captain Jay Bannister. And the lifebuoy today is carried by able seaman boatswain's mate Tara Riley. There's 500 sailors. Watson is the primary warfare training school in Australia. You can see there are many midshipmen there marching. They'll all be junior officers doing the initial phases of their warfare officers training, which are the bridge watchkeeping phases, learning how to drive ships and navigate and and there's also many sailors who are undertaking warfare courses. A very large contingent. It's a principal home of warfare training. Watson was named after Watson's Bay, which in turn is named after Robert Watson, the quartermaster of HMS Sirius, a ship of the First Fleet. He may have... Watson was commissioned as an establishment in 1945 and was originally the home of the Navy's radar school, and anti-submarine schools were added in 1956. And as you can see, there are many very young sailors marching there, and they're probably straight from HMAS Cerberus, and they're undertaking their category courses to become combat system operators who operate all the various sensor elements on the modern warships.
Well, our bands have certainly got some variety in other pipes and drums. The LLC Southern Cross pipes and drums, they were scheduled to be much later in the march, but great to see them here.
Yep. And sneaking in behind them is Sydney's name-shaped ship, HMAS Sydney, led today by Captain Luke Charles Jones, and the lifebuoy is carried by able seaman Wood. Sydney is one of 6 guided missile destroyers that were purchased from the US, of which 4 remain. She was commissioned in 1983 and has recently undergone an extensive upgrade. She's deployed to the Middle East 4 times, taking part in Operation Desert Storm.
Well, going west from Sydney, Parramatta.
Parramatta, my son's ship, he's just gone past. My son's just returned from the Middle East on Parramatta. They've carried out a very successful deployment where they did anti-piracy patrols, and we seem to have flipped back onto Sydney actually, so we'll continue on with Sydney. Sydney obviously is a 4th ship of the name to carry a name, the famous first Sydney with the Emden, second HMAS Sydney, tragically lost in 1941, the carrier Sydney, and now the current Sydney. Many of these sailors had seen active service in the Middle East during the deployment on Sydney and on their other ships. And now we're coming into view Parramatta, led by Commander Guy Blackburn, the lifebuoy by able seaman Featherstone. Many of the crew of Parramatta are off on leave at the moment, which is why it's such a small contingent that having only recently arrived home from the Middle East. A number of these sailors have actually deployed at Parramatta on multiple times. Behind Parramatta is Success, led by Ainsley Moorcroft, Commander Ainsley Moorcroft, a former shipmate of mine, and the lifebuoy leading rider Renee Thorpe. Success is a Durance-class tanker. Built at Cockatoo Dockyard in Sydney in the 1980s, served in the First Gulf War, and provides invaluable logistic support to the Royal Australian Navy. Wherever they need to go, Success will follow with their fuel and stores. She can embark a helicopter, and over the last couple of years she's been supporting exercises off Darwin, Singapore and Malaysia.
We've had magnificent support from the Air League at the moment. This is the squadron from Mount Pritchard.
Yes, and there's a great sight. That's able seaman Bosun's mate Anand. He's a Sikh serving the Royal Australian Navy, and to respect his cultural tradition, rather than wearing the traditional sailor's hat, he actually wears his turban in ceremonial uniform. It's led today by Commander Tim Watson, and Tobruk has been the workhorse of the Royal Australian Navy since her commissioning in 1979, serving in theatres all over the world. She was supposed to originally pay off in 1992, but because of the need, she's been kept going, and many of these sailors have spent their entire, particularly the technical sailors on Tobruk. She also has a contingent of about 20 army personnel in the ship's army department, and they're mainly cargo handlers, stevedores, and they work for the interoperability with the army units that march with Tobruk. She's being deployed to Bougainville, East Timor, Middle East. Now we have HMAS Waterhen, commanded by Commander David Jones. Waterhen is the base depot where the mine hunters are held, and these are the people who provide the logistic support to the mine hunting force element. You can see a large number of technical sailors, stokers, and there's survey ratings, mine warfare ratings, electricians, and the final left one was a medic going past.
Well, this is the first of our Salvation Army bands today. Again, good supporters of the Anzac Day March. This is the band from Blacktown in Western Sydney.
And where would we be without the salvos with the Defence Force, John? They've provided fantastic service all over since Federation, supporting our people with cups of tea and a kind word, comforts of home, And they've had their own losses. An entire Salvation Army band was lost in the fall of a ball in 1942.
In the Monteveo Maru.
In the Monteveo Maru, 70 years ago this July.
Is there anything more typical for Salvation Army bands?
And here we're coming up now is HMAS Anzac, commanded by John Stavridis, and ABC1 boatswain's mate Martin is carrying the lifebuoy. The lead ship of the Anzac class. As I said, she served in Afghanistan, or in the Persian Gulf, in the current conflict, in East Timor. And she's a fine ship with a fine bunch of men and women serving on it. And immediately behind Anzac is HMAS Cuttable. The Cuttable is the stone frigate which all officers and sailors who are posted to the Sydney area are posted to, and we're seeing the last of the Anzac people marching past.
And we saw slip past there Captain Peter Collins, former current affairs broadcaster for ABC and Member of Parliament.
Yes, he was. And these Anzac's actually a West Coast ship, so these sailors are all away from home on Anzac Day. She's on deployment over to the east. And now we have HMAS Cuttable coming in, lifebuoy carried by able boatswain's mate Mark Wallace and led today by Commander Todd Wilson. As I said, the holding depot for all officers and sailors posted to the Fleet Base East area. So such a large contingent of officers marching through, and you might notice there's a lot of crusty old chiefs in there. We have an awful lot of naval reservists who have come back in to perform invaluable duties and are posted to Cuttable. And now we're moving to the junior sailors at Cuttable, and these are a mixture of senior experienced ratings who have been now come ashore for a bit of respite, and young men and women who are waiting for their first sea posting. They represent pretty much every category in the Navy.
Well, you can just look at the Talibans. They vary quite considerably, Tony.
They do. Some of them, there's a lot of Cuttable tallies there, but there's also people who are passing through from other ships. Some on course, and some who are on ships that are attached. In fact, there's a Canimbla tally there, which is a bit strange since she paid off 6 months ago.
Someone forgot to fill in the form, obviously. Now, here we have a great supporter of Anzac Day, the Hills District Pipe Band. They were at the dawn service here at the Cenotaph this morning, playing Lament during the wreath laying and incidental music beforehand. But the crowd, they're still here. It's not raining, of course they're here, to back the Hill District Pipe Band.
And it'll be a long day for them, John, and there's a few of them that aren't spring chickens amongst that lot. But they're doing a fantastic day, and I imagine they'll be going round 2 or 3 times too.
Yes, many of the bands do that, and it's great support. This is why I refer to my earlier comment, we welcome any band who'd like to participate.
Yes, and we seem to have another group of Cuttable. Cuttable obviously has been that large, they've had to split the contingent and put the band in between them, which is unusual. Predominantly Cuttable Tatcallies, I can see a Ballarat one there and a Penguin, Success. It seems to be an odd group going through.
Now, this band's from Sutherland. It is the PCYC Concert Band. Again, we see them every Anzac Day. Looking relaxed. I would think a bit cool today with no coat on out there, but perhaps a bit of vigorous marching will keep them warm.
And here we have the start of the World War II Army Commanders, led today by Major General Sandy Pearson. Major General Pearson graduated from Duntroon in 1940 and was posted to the Armoured Division, the 1st Armoured Division. He was awarded the Military Cross for gallantry under fire while serving in New Guinea. He subsequently commanded the 1st Australian Task Force in Vietnam, where he was awarded a DSO, and also he's a former Commandant of the Royal Military College, Duntroon.
And a very handy rugby player halfback he was.
Following in jeeps are a number of World War II veterans from the operational corps, the armoured regiments, the artillery, the engineers, the SIGs, intelligence, and the independent companies. I'm just looking to see if Brigadier Stringfellow was there. Keith Stringfellow, he was slotted to perhaps be in there today.
Yeah, Keith's one of my former commandos, has not been very well in recent years. One of the commandos, but again, we see our war widows there enjoying the march. They enjoy it every year.
And this looks like the headquarters of one Australian Corps. When they had two divisions, the 6th and 7th were formed. They then had to form a headquarters for command purposes, and it was the headquarters of, they become the commanders of the AOF division. Following them are the gentlemen of the Armoured Corps, the 1st Armoured Regiment, led by Ron Button and Arthur Vulgan, who both served as crewmen in Matilda tanks in the Second World War. They're celebrating their 127th anniversary this year. After the war, they split into a regular unit and an Army Reserve unit, which is the 1st 15th out at Parramatta.
And that's their band there, Bob. That's the 1st 15th Royal New South Wales band. A good band. They performed over many, many years on Anzac Day. And, of course, the 1st 15th, arguably the oldest, very close to it, units in the Australian Army.
On their banner you saw, in fact, they even had the South African campaign and also campaigned in the Second World War. So in the first, in South Africa, they would have been lancers on horses. Now we have the start of the Armoured Regiments, the 2nd, 4th, which used Matilda tanks, and they took them into New Guinea, which a lot of people didn't think they'd be successful. They were very successful. And during the battle to Slaters Knoll and Bougainville, the arrival of these tanks saved the 25th Infantry Battalion from virtually being overrun by the Japanese. Now we have the 2nd, 6th. They were equipped with the American M3, or Stuart, or they were nicknamed the Honey. And it was the first Australian armoured unit to go actually in New Guinea.
And that'd be in Boona and Gona.
Gona. Yeah. There's some famous photographs of the Stuart tanks supporting an infantry attack. Now I think, I'm not sure if we've gone into the gunners. No, the 2nd, still got the 2nd, 6th, we're back to the 2nd, 6th. Again, you can see from their banner all the operations they took part in New Guinea.
Good to see a couple of veterans there in the wheelchairs being supported by their mates for today's march.
Now we have the 14th Field Regiment, the start of the gunners, the gentleman who had a bit of class but otherwise vulgar brawl. The 14th saw operations in the Kokoda Track and also at Milne Bay, where it was the first time the Japanese army was defeated. They performed marvellously in there, and also on the Kokoda Trail, where they were virtually breaking them down and taking them up and assembling the guns up on the hills to fire.
Tell us about searchlights, Bob.
Searchlight batteries. Normally we only see them now on film or movie premieres, and they shine to the sky to get everyone to look. But obviously they were originally used to go and try and eliminate the Japanese or the enemy bombers. Now we start getting the anti-aircraft units. You'll find there'll be light anti-aircraft units, there'll be composite units and the heavies. Lights were normally used Bofors or 40mm Bofors, and the heavies were a 3.7 inch. On their banners it shows them mainly they were up in New and in the Southwest Pacific.
Only small numbers, so they're moving fairly quickly this morning.
Very quickly. Because the trouble with the anti-aircraft gunners, the laws of gravity said what goes up must come down. So the idea is you did stay in your shelter to make sure you weren't hit by the returning pieces of ironmongery that the gunners threw up into the air.
Now this is a nicely turned out pipe and drum combination. You can pick out what they are. Just look at the badge on the bass drummer, just move behind the hat at the moment. Can't quite work it. There it is, the New South Wales Police Pipe Band. They, with their counterparts from their brass band, their military band, certainly very popular at ceremonial events throughout Sydney.
And here we have the 52nd Composite. Again, you can see that they have the various units that added up to make this unit, and they're obviously where they served again in the Dutch New Guinea, and then they went with the Dutch New Guinea. Again, they provided anti-aircraft protection from the attacks by the Japanese Air Force. And as I say, the light ones would have been probably using 40mm Bofors for protection. Now we have the 53rd Composite Regiment. Again, you can see they actually finished up in Borneo, Tarakan, but they spent most of their time in Buna and then over to Borneo.
Just take the opportunity to talk about the crowd. We just had some shots of them there as the marchers came past. The crowd is building up. They're enthusiastic, quite happy to stay in the breeze. And of course in Sydney they're virtually canyons now, and it channels the wind, and it's a lot stronger there than it would be elsewhere.
Now again we see more anti-aircraft units. This one, the 554, 555, started off as an anti-tank regiment, but of course not having terribly many tanks to shoot at in New Guinea, they were converted into anti-aircraft batteries.
Still the artillery as a survey regiment.
Again, the survey is required so the gunners knew where they were on the map, so that they could go and put in aimed accurate fires to support the infantry units.
But unfortunately, no longer existing.
Well, the Survey Corps itself has now been disbanded, unfortunately, but I suppose all these surveys rocking around is no longer required. And now we start to come into the gentlemen of the Coast Artillery. Again, normally they were posted around the major cities of Australia to go and provide artillery support to stop any ships or attacks from enemy aircraft and also ships coming into Sydney Harbour or Melbourne.
Now this is the cadet band from the Shore School at North Sydney, again a regular contributor to support to the Anzac Day March.
Now we start with the engineers, or ginger bears as they were known as. So these are the builders and contractors of the Army, and they numbered about 28,000 during the war and made about 9%. And their idea is they built, not only they build, they also demolish things. And all engineers seem to have that skill, that boyish delight in blowing things up. Now we have the water transport. We are moving through quickly. Water
also
transport,
part of the engineers.
Yes, part of the engineers, or the Army's Navy, in fact. And they went and normally crewed small ships and landing craft that provided essential support for troops when they ferried troops to an area where the larger Navy ships couldn't get. In fact, one of the members was the old famous Sir Frank Packer was a member of it. Now we have I think I missed that one, the 8th. Again, it's another engineer unit.
One of the field companies, yes.
One of the field companies. Again, you can see that they mainly served in New Guinea.
Again, diminishing numbers, but still with the field companies, this time the 14th
Field Company. Again, their tally shows that they served in New Guinea, and again, they performed the engineer, the road building, the bridge building, all these things so essential for the Army to be able to be mobile. Another one, the 27th Field Company, again with very few people there, but they still performed such magnificent feats. Now we have an Army troop. So I must admit, but I wasn't used to.
I think it might be one of the troop transport companies.
Yeah. Yes. Engineers, but again, pioneer companies. Pioneers, again, were engineers which were attached to Army headquarters who they were allocated out as required, but they performed the
one we couldn't work out was, in fact, the Army Troop Company. They had service in New Guinea, Mauritania, Ambon and Timor.
Yes,
first. And quite obviously, Yagoona District, it's the Yagoona District Band, Yagoona being a Sydney in southwest, or suburb in southwest Sydney, and playing some old tunes, very reminiscent of both World War I and II.
Now we come to the Signal Corps, now whose motto is swift and sure. Signals were formed in October of 1939 and provided communications to North Africa, Middle East, Greece and New Guinea.
And that was John Fraser in front leading that group, Bob.
Of course, they didn't have all the modern convenience we have now. There is someone obviously doing some Morse with his little lamp there. Something the Navy used probably more than the Army, but it's another form of communication.
I hope the message is not rude.
We won't ask for it. Line of communication signals connected military units to front lines and their support bases, and obviously they're coming through with very quickly now since there's so few. But again, the Signals Corps provided the most important thing is the communication between headquarters and the troops. Air warning. The spotters, these are, I think, more coast watchers. They play spotted teams. The Army put spotted teams at vantage points on the movements of Japanese troops, aircraft and vessels. They could be reported back. This is before the age of radar, which gave you the information the spotters gave. Hangao. They maintained law and order, provided medical service in areas not under control of the Japanese, and they also recruited local people to go and for the labour effort.
And they're the New Guinea Volunteer Infantry Battalion.
Yes, and behind them the Pigeons. Behind them would come the Central Bureau Intelligence Corps. They were the eavesdroppers, and in fact, they were the artists that General MacArthur took with him when he invaded the Philippines. The rest of the Australian Army was either in New Guinea or over in Borneo, but he took them. Now we have the Donners, of course, the motorcyclists, and again, because of the fact you might not have wireless, they carried important messages between headquarters, and they do it on foot or mainly on their motorbikes. But it was a very dangerous type of occupation because normally they were on their own.
Not sure the Army still has motorcycles, do they, Bob?
Oh yes, I think SAS still have them with those phony little four.
We haven't seen them for a while.
And the military police do as well.
Of course, yes. We tend to forget about the military police.
Perhaps it's
They're
just
some happy spectators, but they're waving the paratroopers.
Paratroopers. The Australian Army trained these paratroopers, but they were never used in battle, unfortunately. The only time Australian troops or the infantry were used in battle was an AONF and the gunners who they threw out over Anzac were never trained. Now it looks like we have paras. By the look of those colours, they're it's the Red Devils.
Red berets.
Yes, the Red Berets that. I think the British had the British para regiment who were called the Red Devils by the Germans. And I think it's a frustration of the Australians that they're never actually used for a combat jump.
And immediately behind our paratrooper, we can see the remnants of our Red Berets there, but they're leading the northern suburbs pipe band. And there appears to be a little bit of gap down George Street behind the pipe band there at the moment.
And I got the feeling I think I saw Keith Stringfellow in this Land Rover. I could be wrong, but it's the start of the commandos. Yes, that's Keith Stringfellow standing up with the green beret, and he is leading the commandos. And they were formed in 1941 as independent companies to fight behind the enemy lines. The men saw action in the whole of the Southwest Pacific area, in the Solomon Islands, Timor, New Guinea, Bougainville, Rabaul, Tarakan and Borneo.
And of course the famous raids on Singapore.
And obviously we have our Land Rovers for those who can no longer march. But yes, there's Keith. I thought he was supposed to be in something else, but it's good to see him there, and he's recovered enough to come on parade today. He's got his Z Force beret on. You can see the Z with a bayonet through it, and there it was a part of the badge of the famous Z Force.
There was some discussion whether the former Brigadier Stringfellow would be on parade today, but he is. I'm glad to see him there.
And obviously the descendants of the commando companies coming through now.
Yes, some of the, as we have the red berets for the parachute troops, so we have the green berets, their typical headwear for our Commando and Special Forces unit.
Now we have, that was Sparrow Force, the second independent company who was mainly in Timor and there until they were relieved some years later. Into the service troops, these are the ones who provided the trucks and all the things that needed. Today was led by Max Fenimore, and they provide the supply transport companies. The first one behind it, Australian Army Service Corps, would have been a transport. Again, it was in Darwin, according to the its badge.
We've been unable to pick up Max, Bob, so Hume, unfortunately, he hasn't been able to make it today. Incidentally, the Service Corps, that's another corps not existing in the Australian Army at the moment.
Yes, it's now a Corps of Transport.
Now this is from Summer Hill in the western suburb of Sydney, the band of Trinity Grammar School. School colours there, of course, green and white reflected in their headdress and, of course, their jackets. And they look quite resplendent there with the pith helmets. They don't sound too bad either.
I think they sound very good. It's good to see another school band has turned out so well and play so well.
Now there is a group of cadets immediately behind. Unfortunately, I don't know which group, region, or otherwise carries that colour puggaree.
could be a school puggaree. Now we have the biscuit bombers. The biscuit bombers were those from the Service Corps who volunteered at the time to go and actually push, shall we say, sacks of supplies out the side doors of Dakotas. There was no OHS in those days, and I think they were tied in with a piece of rope to something to make sure they didn't go out the side of the Dakotas and the planes that they were using at the time.
But of course they were pioneers in that field in the world.
Yeah. Now we come to the General Transport Company, 201. Normally you'll find it'll be 201, 2, 5 and 6. These men drove to 3 and 5 ton trucks and transported and resupplied the Australian troops across the Middle East and the Southwest Pacific. These also come under artillery and small armed fire. And of course the transport companies we have now in Afghanistan have got these IED improvised explosive bombs that go off